That's what Jeff is too.
Yeah.
Jeff, but this was Jeff's first time playing tennis.
Ever? How did they talk about this?
Do you want me to turn off the lights?
I don't know. No, not yet. Soon. Well, I don't know what we're doing. Yeah. Okay, so let's. Actually, yes. Turn off the lights.
Back good or all of them?
That's fine. I think.
I'll just wait till.
There we go.
That one?
I do it. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's talk about. So we're talking about starting, okay, and starts in general, but I want to go over first kind of and we worked on this for those who were at practice this morning. We were doing some work on accelerations. So stopping your boat and then getting your boat going off the starting line from the stop position. And so we'll watch some video here from it. These guys are already kind of stopped. So I have one question to ask. How do you stop your boat? So if you're moving, and you're approaching the starting line, right? I'm approaching the starting line. How do I stop?
Love the jib.
So definitely love the jib. What else?
Head up slightly, not like fully in irons, but just so your sails are luffing.
Okay, so I luff the jib and luff the mainsail. So if I do those things, and I just do those things, and let's say I'm coming in with whatever amount of speed I'm coming in with, and I want to stop here. Am I going to stop here if I don't do anything else other than just let the sails luff?
No.
Bach will shake his head.
Huh.
No, what do I have? What is gonna happen?
Well, you still have some momentum. So
I
you're
still
gonna-
have some
So
momentum.
you're gonna go over the line.
So I'm going that momentum means I'm gonna keep moving forward. And so instead of stopping in this spot where I want to be, which is with my bow slightly under the line, I'm gonna end up continuing to move. Right, so I'm looking at my sails luffing, but I'm still moving. That's because of that remaining momentum. So how do I get rid of that momentum? Baku.
You can like push your main out.
So push the main out. So the term for that is
Backwind?
backwind the main, right? So you're gonna push the boom out until the main is backwind. We know what backwinding means with the jib, right? With tacking, right? Keeping the jib sheet tight so that it fills from the wrong side, right? To help the boat turn in the tack. You're doing that with the main. You're pushing the boom out, and so you push the boom out and you back. Now the key to that working is, so if I'm pointing, I didn't bring my boats today, sorry, that's why I'm using my own artistic skills. If I'm pointing like this, wind's coming from here, right? Am I gonna be able to push the main out? I mean, yes, probably, but,
Not enough to be effective.
well, how much main am I gonna have to push out here in order to actually get the sail to backwind, if it even does backwind?
All the way.
Yeah, probably, yeah, right, because I'm kind of like pointing on like a reach here, right? So the key is to be pointing where?
Above close on, but like not.
Yeah, I mean, you could be slightly above close haul, at least close haul, you can even be slightly under it. But you have to be somewhere in that close haul or slightly above or below, so that the second you actually push the main out, it's actually gonna backwind. And then, how long am I holding that boom out?
Few seconds, or like until you stop.
Until you stop. If I keep holding the boom out, and I've stopped, but I continue to hold the boom out, what is gonna happen?
Start drifting backwards.
I'm gonna start sailing backwards, right? So If I don't wanna start sailing backwards, I wanna release the boom, right? I don't wanna keep holding the boom out. If I maybe came in with a little too much momentum and maybe I'm slightly over the line, maybe I do wanna go a little bit backwards, right? To get myself back below the line. That's all just situationally dependent. But the key is, like, once you are satisfied with with your boat's position in relation to the line, let go of the boom and stop it from backwinding, right? Or else, again, you'll just keep moving backwards. Now, while you're doing this, okay, so that's the stopping, okay? Let's watch this, and let's see. So, okay, so these are these kind of accelerations, and there'll be another one in a second. I think they're gonna stop again, right? So they stopped, right? So here, like, there's no line, so they're not doing the push the boom out thing. They're just luffing the sails, right? And so pointing like pretty, look back at that, right? Pointing, you know, definitely a little bit above close hauled because both sails are luffing. Now, that was actually pretty nice. We can watch some more. So we'll watch some more of these, and then I want you guys to kind of tell me what the steps are to doing the acceleration off the line. Like, try to notice like what is happening here from a body positioning point of view, from a sail trim point of view. That was a better one, probably.
They feel like they're just simulating a roll tap.
Okay. So here's another. There's a group shot here, right? So step one here is you have to be, so what do you notice from like turning the boat point of view? So they're all doing what right now? They're pointing where? They're all pointing
Close hold.
pretty close to the wind, right? So they're not trying to accelerate from this position, right? You can't be pointing close hauled or almost close hauled and just trimming your sails and go from this position, okay? I mean, you can. You have to head down a little. You can, but it's not gonna be fast. Okay. So now, watch what are they starting to do?
Head down.
They're heading down, right? So, steering wise heading down, and one of the other ones, you could see, and even here, maybe the skippers are doing it a little bit. Not quite, but from a weight point of view, skipper's point of view, if they move their weight to the windward, more to the windward side, almost like simulate hiking out a bit, that will turn the boat down. Remember, weight to the windward side heads the boat down, weight to leeward is going to head the boat up, and we'll see the weight to leeward effect in a second here. So, the turning down with the tiller, maybe even some weight to windward. Okay, if you really need help, if you were really like almost in irons, and you needed more help to turn the boat away from the wind, to start to turn the boat down, what can the crew do with the jib? So let's say you were pointing almost into irons here, right? So let's say these boats were pointing even a little farther up, and the crew trimmed in the jib from the port side, which would be the normal side that they would want to trim it in from this case. But the jib wasn't filling, right? Because they're still too high, they're still too close to the wind. What can you do, just in general, to help the boat turn away from the wind here? So turn the boat that way, to the left. Backwind the jib, meaning trimming which jib sheet?
Starboard.
Starboard jib sheet. Right. So we trim the starboard jib sheet. That's gonna turn the boat down. It's gonna turn the boat towards the pin to leeward. And you're gonna backwind it until what? Until the boat is where?
In the close hold position.
Yeah, until it's definitely back to the close haul position, because then in that case, you'll be able to then release the starboard jib sheet, and you'll actually be able to trim the port jib sheet, and the jib will actually fill. So if you remember from whatever other, one other time, I don't remember which talk we talked about it, but when you trim the jib in normally, right, trimming the jib in does what? Which way does that turn the boat?
Down.
Heads the boat down, right? So once you're able to trim the port jib sheet and it's gonna fill, the boat is that's gonna also help the boat head down, right? The back winding is just if you need help to get it back, to get the boat back to that close hauled position. Now, if it's really light wind, if it's you're kind of really fighting for a spot where you're kind of sandwiched between two boats, it could be some pretty aggressive steering and work that needs to be done with the jib, backwinding it and such, in order to actually keep control of the boat. Right? At all times you want to have control of the boat. Be able to move the boat when you want. You don't want to get stuck in irons. Now, so maybe a little backwind, but here they kind of don't need it because they're not heading up that high, right? So now crews trim the jib, right? So that's starting to head the boat down. But now you're heading the boat away from the wind. So notice so are the main sails fully trimmed in here?
No.
No, not fully trimmed in, right? Notice, right? Those are look there, right? Definitely not fully trimmed in because they're heading down to a reach, right? They're heading down to a reach, and so they're trimming the sail accordingly. Both sails are trimmed accordingly, right? Neither the jib nor the main are fully trimmed in because you're not close hauled yet, right? Then you notice, right? Now notice what they're doing. So Owen said this before. It's kind of like they're simulating a roll tack in a way. Right? Notice, right, they're heeling the boat to leeward. So the crew is throwing their weight to leeward. The skippers are standing and kind of bringing that foot down to the leeward side to heel the boat to leeward. So what is that doing? Number one, it's heeling the boat to give you to roll the boat so that you get an acceleration from the flatten. Number two, what is it doing? Weight to leeward heads the boat up. And we want to head up here, right? Our ultimate goal at the end of this whole thing is we want to end up close hauled, right? So we've headed down to that reach in order to generate speed, but then we want to turn that speed that we've generated into going close hauled at the end, right? So the trick is, one of the tricks here is coordination between skipper and crew on the roll, right? What you don't want is, you don't want the crew to throw their weight down and the skipper to be counteracting it the other way, or the crew to throw their weight down, the skipper not to, then the skipper hasn't done it yet, the crew starts to come up, then the skipper decides to roll, right? It's all out of balance. So ideally, you're both doing it at the same time. So that is coordination, that's going into it, maybe discussing it just in an ideal scenario, what time in the sequence do we agree that we're going to heel the boat, right? Maybe that's 3 seconds, maybe that's 4 seconds, and obviously that's potentially gonna change depending on what the specific scenario is on the line with other boats. Maybe it means that you're gonna have to do it sooner, maybe it means you're gonna have to do it later. I mean, ultimately, I think the skipper needs to be the one that's gonna call that out. And again, the communication there is important, so you can't just, to give it the crew at least like a second or two, like a little countdown and be like, okay, roll in 3, 2, right? They'll just be like, roll, because then it's gonna be delayed, right? So it needs to be at least some short period of time where you're giving the crew the heads up that Okay, in 2 seconds, 3 or 2, 1, roll. So that you make it more likely that you're gonna do it in sync. Then, right, so now they've rolled. Now tillers are towards the sail, so they're starting to head up. And they're flattening. And then at the end, they're trimmed in, going close hauled. Okay, and now this, I don't think there's a starting line here, but put a starting line into the equation, and your goal is that your bow is hitting that line at go. So there, right? So that was a pretty. So the skipper there was like pretty aggressive with their. So here, right? So that's a good example, right? This is a good one, right? So body weight, right? So using the steering to head down, also body weight, right? Look at the crew is even throwing their weight to windward a bit. Skipper not as much there, but that again helps the boat head down. So as the crew, as they're coming down, notice, right? Look what she did, right? She had the sail trimmed in. As they were heading down, she's already eased it. Now they're gonna roll. There. Jib is still eased on both boats, right? And then they're going to flatten and trim. So there's another one. So in wind, as it gets windier, right? You're not rolling as much. If it's really windy, you're not rolling at all, probably. There's enough wind to just kind of get the boat going, and like rolling the boat is just gonna actually make it go slower. Right, so here notice like nobody is heading up super high to the point where they need to backwind the jib to get the boat to head down. Trim, yep. So some of these are better than others, but some of these are better than others, but right. The key here is, I think one of the keys is noticing, especially with the jib trim, right? Noticing that how dynamic the jib trim is, right? The crew is adjusting the jib depending on where the boat is pointing at any given time, right? They're not just keeping the jib strapped in, right? As the boat heads down, the crew is throwing their weight down, but they're easing the jib simultaneously. The other thing to see here on all of these is when the boat is stopped, the skipper, that guy, the 14 did a major roll windward there. But the other thing to realize is that from the skipper's point of view, they're not, when the boat's in the stop position, they're not just letting the sail out. We can just let these roll. They're not just letting the sail out, right? Like they're not just like letting go of the main sheet. They always have control of the main sheet, and they're letting it out just enough so that the sail is luffing, but just enough to where once they start to trim again, that's actually going to start trimming in the sail. So what I mean by that is, you can let your sail out, right? You can let the mainsail out. And you can let a ton more sheet out than you have to get the sail to luff. The problem with that is, if you have so much main sheet out, in order to get going again, you need to trim in all of that sheet just to get the sail to start to fill. So what you want is, you want to let the main sheet out the minimum amount that you have to in order to get the sail to luff. Because then you've accomplished your goal, right? The sail is luffing. Letting more main sheet out doesn't make the sail luff anymore once it's already luffing. All it does is create more sheet that you now have to trim in order for the sail to fill again and for you to go. Does that make sense? Right, so I think that's a common thing that I've noticed with a lot of, when we're kind of learning this, is that like stopping the boat, kind of just let the sheet go, and there's just so much slack in the sheet, and then when you have to start going again, you have to trim in so much. And also that you just kind of let go of the sheet and it's just like there in the boat. You need to have constant control over it. Okay? Does that make sense?
These are just tags, which kind of not what we were talking about, but,
Okay, we can let that sit there for a second. So does that make sense? The acceleration maneuver. Okay. So on the starting line, we're setting up on the starting line. The ideal position that we want to be in is to have our boat stopped slightly underneath the line. Right? If we're over the line, that's potentially a problem because, right, so if we're set up and we're over, we obviously have to do a more dramatic head down, right, in order to get below the line. But we could have a problem doing that if there's another boat to leeward of us, right? We have to wait for them to head down, and if they're not going to head down soon enough, and we're still over, we'll get called over, and that's a problem. So you want to be slightly underneath the line when you're doing your setup. Then you're heading down, again, you're heading down kind of like to that reach, meaning that you're probably pointing more or less somewhere towards the pin, right? If you're pointing like below the pin, you're definitely, almost certainly going too low. And you're just getting farther away from the line than you have to. So one thing to talk, so if you do have, right, boats to leeward of you, so let's say this is you and you have a boat to leeward of you, remember you have to wait for this boat to head down in order for you to head down. Right? So that's why one of the most important things on the starting line is you want to try to create as much space to leeward of you as possible. If you can avoid it, you don't want a boat that is directly underneath you, like, an inch or two away from you. Because number one, you have to wait for them to go down in order for you to start your acceleration. And then also, if they're that close to you to leeward, they're probably going to end up shooting you out the back off the line. So one thing to think about, this adds adding other boats into the equation, right? You want, when you're setting up, you always want your bow to be at least even with the other boats around you, right? If you set up, and this is you, and you're kind of like that, right? So this is you, and these are the other boats. This is not good. What's going to happen is, number one, you're not close to the line, right? You're not on the line. Number two, you're getting what's called lee bowed. You're going to get lee bowed by this boat. You're getting blanketed by this boat, and since your bow is back of both of them, you're in the wind shadow coming off of both of these boats, and so you're just going to end up getting spit out the back. So this is something that's important for both skipper and crew to be aware of on the line when you're setting up, right? To look at where your bow is in relation to these other boats. And to say like, okay, are we bow even or not? And if we're not bow even, at least bow even, right? Meaning our bow is even with the rest, we need to do that. The only scenario where, now you would say, well, what if everyone else is, what if we think all the boats around us are over, right? And so we want to, only if you're 100% sure that those other boats are over. If not, it is to your advantage, and what you should do is you need to be even with these other boats. if you're all over, you're all over. Most likely what's gonna happen is, particularly if you're kind of getting blocked by some other boats, you're not gonna get called, right? The most egregious ones are gonna get called. Unless, even though you're in the middle, unless you're like, unless you're like here, then obviously you're the most obvious one and you're gonna get called. But as long, the key is to be even with other boats on the line. Okay, like that's probably one of the most important things in starting. Because if you don't do that, you are putting yourself at a massive disadvantage right at go. And you're putting yourself behind immediately. So that's important. Let's talk about for a second let's talk about one thing first, and then we'll talk about that. So, if the wind is like this, okay, this is where we would say the wind is square to the line. So, is any side of the line favored? Here. If the wind is coming 90 degrees to the line. Luckily.
Boat end probably, just because you have more space in case you need to go. Like if you set up on the line too early, so you have more space too.
I have more space to.
So
down with him.
Right. Okay. Okay. More right. I just mean like wind direction wise.
no.
Is there a side of the line that is more advantageous wind direction wise?
No.
No, when it's square to the line, right? So, and now if it's like this, how about now? That's your wind direction, right? Coming down in the ladder rungs. Right, we can draw the ladder rungs if you want, right? Make it easier, right? Remember, you can think of the wind as ladder rungs coming down. You want to climb the ladder, right? You want to be higher up the ladder. So the wind is coming from the right, the boat end, right? I have a boat here, I have a boat here. This boat is on a higher ladder rung, right? If the wind is coming from the right, what does that mean starboard tack is? So a boat that's on starboard versus a boat that's on port. Which one?
What? On starboard.
Starboard, right? Starboard tack will be lifted. You're going to be able to head up higher on starboard tack because the wind is coming more from the right side. Okay, and you're going to be headed on port. You're not going to be able to point as high on port. So, from a starting point of view, where this comes into play is if the wind is to the right. What are you going to notice? Since you're lifted on starboard, since starboard is lifted, what is it going to be easier? What's going to be easier to happen? What's going to happen easier? Like what's going to
Getting to the upland mark.
getting to the upland mark and added to that, getting to the line is going to be easier, right? You're going to, if you head up, right? You're going to be able to head up higher on starboard, and so heading up higher brings you closer to the line. Therefore, it's going to be easier to be over. If you approach, so if I approach the line from like right here, right, like right at the boat end, and I come in, and I'm approaching the line from really close, and then I head up, I'm not going to get into irons because I'm lifted until my boat is maybe like halfway over the line. So what that means is if the wind is coming more from the right and starboard is lifted, I'd want to approach from where? If it's going to be if the closer I am to the line when I approach it, when I'm lifted on starboard, means that I'm gonna likely be over, or it's gonna be easier to be over, what does that mean I should do? Go to port. No,
Backwind.
no. Definitely don't start on port, because you're gonna be heavy. Don't do that.
Always.
Backwind. Backwind the main.
Yeah, but
Just start further back.
yes, thank you, Avery. Yes,
I feel like that's not the answer because that's so obvious.
that is the answer.
Yay.
That is the answer. Is do your approach from farther back. Right? So that you approach from farther away so that once you do you come and you can stop in your final spot, you're going to be where you want to be, which is slightly below the line. Right? Instead of if you're still coming in like over here on the reach and now you head up, again, you're going to end up like that. Over the line. No good. So I think the easier thing to think about is when it's the opposite way, right? So when the wind is, because we've experienced this a lot. Brian and Wally tend to set port favored lines a lot, like a lot. So when the wind is more from the left side, okay. So think about this from a lifted and headed point of view, right? If the wind is more to the left, what tack is lifted? Pointing you're gonna be able to point higher on which tack? Port or starboard?
Port.
Port, right. So a boat that's on port is gonna be able to head up higher than a boat that's on starboard. So, if the wind is more to the left, depending on how left it is, you're gonna find that the more and more left it is in relation to the line, the harder and harder it is to actually get across the line on starboard. So if you're trimmed in, right, fully close hauled, and you're pointing, and this is what close hauled looks like, right? Looks like this. Obviously, and it could be even more extreme, right? Where it could be, if it's that headed, if starboard is that headed, you could be pointing like this. So like barely making the line. Or you're almost like parallel to the line. That is if you weren't sure before, that is a dead giveaway that the wind is coming more from the left. Right? And therefore, port is going to be favored. So an extension of, just a quick extension of this is, what does this mean you want to do as soon as possible after the start? Tack. Right? As soon as possible after the start, you want to be able to tack and get on port, which is the lifted tack. But, going back to the thing about, if starboard is headed, if starboard is headed, that means it's going to be harder, the more headed it is, the harder it's going to be to actually get up to the line. So therefore, that means that if I'm trying to approach the line from down here, okay, that's a problem. So I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say, well, if I'm, what you have to make sure you do is there's, so just like there's ley lines, right, for the windward mark, right? There's ley lines for the starting line. So, meaning, if you're trimmed in, close hauled, and you're not, so here I'm trimmed in, I'm close hauled, right? And I'm pointing like this. This is not good, right? I am not on, because of the wind shift and where my position is, I am below the ley line, right? I am not making the starting line. So if this is the case, and I'm here, what do I need to do? I need to tack, yes. I do not need to jibe. That is something that I see people do. When you're not making the line, and you're already far away from the line, I see people jibing. Yes, curious, I know, very curious. Don't do that. Because jibing, by definition, is taking you farther away from the line. So if you're already saying to yourself, shoot, we gotta get closer, jibing is hurting you. So you definitely want to tack. You want to tack, and you'd want to, depending on where you want to start, right? But at least you want to get to some point where, at least where when you tack and you're close hauled, you're actually going to be able to get across the starting line. Okay, so that's important. It's really important to know what your lay line is, and if you're where you currently are, am I actually able to cross the line on starboard when I'm close hauled? And if the answer to that is no, you need to get closer to the line. You need to tack and then tack back at some point, but you need to get closer to the line if you can't make the line on close haul. This happens a lot. And I think if you keep that in mind, that's gonna minimize the chances that you're just not gonna make the line. So this happened to you, and I guess it was you and Amy a couple weeks ago.
With SBS?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, where the pin was very, very, very favored,
Mm-hmm.
right, and everyone was kind of, water boats were piled up there,
Yeah.
right? But regardless, like you were set up too low to the point where like you were like this, you were already close hauled.
Yeah.
And you're trying to now you're trying to pinch and go into irons to just get over that pin, right? Whereas if you had just been a little bit higher up, that wouldn't have been an issue, right? Or at least you would have been. It was still really favored, right? Starboard was still really headed. You still would have needed to tack on the port as soon as possible, but at least you would have been able to get across the line if you were higher up, right? So if you were instead if you were like that, just closer to the line, then at least you can, even if that trajectory is like almost parallel, at least at that point you're getting across the line. Close haul, right? You have full power of the sails. You're actually able to sail, versus here where you're just like half in irons just to try to get your boat across it. Okay, does that make sense? Yes. Okay, that's good. So yes.
Wait, I have a quick question.
Go for it.
So, the pin is obviously favored because
Yes.
it's at a higher
it's
ladder.
left,
right?
Yeah. Pin's
But
favorite. Right.
if I get close enough to pin, then there's a chance that I don't make the mark. I mean, I don't make the line. Like if I'm too close to the pin.
Yes, there's a chance. Yeah, I think the best thing, probably the best way to start when the pin is super favored like this is actually, so if you are the pinmost boat, that is a very high risk, high reward scenario, right? So the reward, if you pull it off perfectly, is very big because you're winning the race at that point. If you pull off a pin start perfectly, and when the pin is that favored. The negative potential of that is also very great, because remember, so if you're here, right, even if you're the pinmost boat and you have a bunch of other boats, right, blah, 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 and you want to tack, what do you have to wait for?
For everyone else too.
At least this guy,
Yeah.
probably, and a whole chain of boats. Now, if it's so favored, you hope that all of these boats are going to go, right? Because they're going to realize, well, shoot, we're headed here, like a lot. We all should tack. Does that always happen? No. Also, does it always happen in a timely fashion? No. So because of the delay, right, what you might get is, this boat that was fifth boat from the pin, but there's more of a gap here between them and other boats, let's say. They're able to tack away quickly, start going, sailing the lift, and there's a whole delay until everyone else starts to go, and then until you're finally able to go. right? So if you want to get on port as soon as possible because port is lifted, a lot of times the slightly more conservative but ultimately higher rate of return for you is going to be not to be right at the pin, but to be pin adjacent, somewhere in the vicinity of that pin, right? You don't want to be, there's no reason if the pin is that favored and port is that lifted, there's no reason to, be all the way at the boat, right? If there's space to start more towards the pin. There's no reason to, be on the completely unfavored side. But there is good reason to go somewhere, wherever you can get close enough to the pin where there's less boat traffic and where you have more of an opportunity to be able to tack away onto port sooner. Right? The more control you have over your destiny of being able to tack when you want, and this is just overall, right? Regardless of which side of the line is favored, the better you are. The less you have to rely on waiting for other boats, the better. Easier said than done, but something that's just a concept that you should always be thinking about when you're setting up on a line, right? Is try to think about what is going to happen after we start. What's going to happen 30 seconds later? What's going to happen a minute later? In the position that I'm in, what is this going to look like once we start sailing up the course? And am I in a position that's going to give me more control, or am I in a position where I've given up most of my control and I'm at the mercy of waiting on a bunch of other boats? Right? And there's not one constant way to view it. It's going to change every time depending on where everybody is and all that kind of stuff. But it's something to think about. Approaches to the start. So there's a couple ways you could do it. But some people do, like we teach young opti kids to do a lot of times, is kind of just sail back and forth on the line. I think, and to some extent, everybody's you're doing that to a certain extent anyway, right? You're sailing back, you gotta kill time. But there's two major ways you can do this, right? You can come in to your final approach to get your final spot on the line. You can come in from the boat end, right? And kind of sail down and kind of look, right? And look and see okay, I'm gonna scooch in over here, right? So you could do that. Or you could do the port approach, which I love, and I think is really, really powerful, so port approach does not mean you're starting on port. At go, you are not on port. You are approaching to get your final spot on the line. You're approaching on port to get that final spot. You are going to tack on to starboard. You're going to start on starboard. So, depending on timing, maybe this is at a minute. Maybe this is at a minute 30. Depending on how early other boats are setting up on the line. But I approach more from the pin end, and this way I have a better view of where spots are. So I can sail and I can be okay, ooh, this looks good. I can just tack right here. I can tack right there. Right? And I can get my spot, tack onto starboard into my spot. Why does this give you a better view? It gives you a better than the starboard approach. It gives you a better view because when you're approaching on starboard from this boat end, right? add more boats. You're not, because of all the sails and also from the side that you're on, you can't really see very well where spots might exist and also how big those spots actually are. The other thing that'll happen if these other boats are good, what they're gonna do is, so let's say there's a spot here, and they can do it when you're approaching from port too, but is you're trying to approach from behind here, you're trying to get this spot. If you were this boat, okay, what would you be trying to do? If you saw that there's a boat coming from behind and they look like, and you see there's a nice sized spot here, and it's pretty clear that they are gonna probably want that, what are you gonna try to do?
Try to block it.
You would try to block it, right? So they might try to head down, because they don't want, remember we talked about space to leeward, right? Right now, this boat's very happy, because there are boats to leeward, but there's a lot of space in between. So this boat loves this. This boat does not want one boat or two boats cramming themselves in here. So what they're gonna do is, they're gonna head down, and they're gonna make this spot a lot less enticing. Maybe even close it enough to where this boat now has to give up, right? So they close this spot enough to where now kind of looks like that maybe. So now you're like, oh shoot, okay, can't go here. Can't really go here, can't really go here. I'm out of spots, right? So approaching from port gives you, now again, right, if you're approaching from port, this boat can do the same thing, right? They can head down, but you also have more options, right? You can then decide, okay, I'll just go past this boat. Maybe there's a spot, maybe this guy starts to head down, but he's leaving a spot to windward of him, right? Maybe there's another boat here, and I can slide in here. Basically what you're doing is you're just giving yourself a better view of the line to where the opportunities exist. The thing to remember is a couple things. Number one, you're on port, so you do not have right of way, right? So you can't just kind of do whatever you want, because most other boats will be on starboard. The other thing you have to do is you just have to time it right? You can't do this too late, because then there probably won't be any spots left. And too early is also a problem a lot of times, because if you set up at a minute 30 and you're on the line, so what's probably going to happen here, right? So let's say, no matter how you approach the line, right? If you approach and you're set up and you're happy, you're luffing, and this is at a minute 30 or something, right? Or even we'll say it's at a minute, depending on the fleet. Sometimes like really good fleets, a minute, like they'll all set up and like you have to be set up at a minute. But most times for a lot of regattas we're doing, and even like, I mean honestly, even like when we sail with SBS, a lot of times they're all coming in at like 10 seconds anyway. No one's really staying on the line for a long time, at least not what I've seen. So the longer you have to hold your spot here, the more likely it is, number one, that you're not going to be able to, you'll get too far away from the line, you'll mess up like, just your general positioning. But the other thing is, the nice spot that you had now is going to become, so let's say you get a boat that swoops in here, then you get somebody that's coming in from a port approach here, and they come over here. Then all of a sudden that spot that you had is no longer a great spot. Right, so too early is usually not good. Because what will happen is boats will come in a little later and will kind of just snipe the spots around you and make your spot a lot more crammed and therefore not as good. Okay, does the port approach make sense? If you're gonna, So the other thing, right, with the port approach, it doesn't mean, some people have the misconception that, well, a port approach means that I have to start near the pin. No, doesn't mean that. You can do your port approach and go, and you can end up right here by the boat, if that's your goal. Again, it's all just about timing, right? So if you're going to do your port approach and you want to end up somewhere near the boat, you're going to have to start that port approach a little bit earlier, because you're going to need time to go down the line. Or maybe you don't start your port approach right from the pin. Maybe you start your port approach, maybe, right, you're on starboard, you go halfway down the line, you tack, or you jibe, right, you tack, now I'm back on port, and now I'm going to come in, and now I'm going to go in for my final spot. Right, so the port approach allows you, depending on where you started from and what time you're going to start it at, allows you to start anywhere. Not just at the pin. If you want to start at the boat, one thing to remember is the barging rule, right? So here, there's a boat here, and I'm here. Can I go in here? If this boat's blocking me, no, that's called barging. I can't do that. Okay, you can't squeeze yourself in between a sailboat and the committee boat, or if this is just a pin or whatever. That's barging. You can't do that. What you can do is if the overlap is already established, right, between these two boats, and now you as the inside boat, you're already in there, right? So we can draw these like kind of closer to the committee boat here, right? Right? If you're already in there, and this boat now is trying to say, no, don't go in there, and they're trying to block you out, they can't do that because you do not have an out. If your out is, you're going to have to hit the committee boat, you're not barging in that case. In that case, they have to let you in. They have let you in already. Okay? They have to keep you out prior to you getting that overlap. So if you're back here, and now they say like, we can draw, if they're not overlapped with the boat yet, right? Now they say, nope, we're shutting the door. You have an out. You can tack around here, and you can tack around without hitting the committee boat. So in this case, they are allowed to do that, because you would be barging in that case. But if you're kind of sailing, and they let you in to the point of no return, right? Where if they've let you into the point where now they decide they don't want you in there, but they've already overlapped and you're already over with the committee boat, they have to just live with it. They can hedge you up, right? Like they're still a lured boat, so they can still hedge you up, but they can't box you out, right? And they can't hedge you up into the committee boat or anything. That's the other thing, just in general on the line, right? You have boats. The boats to leeward have right, so they can head boats to windward up. How much can they head them up?
Not past iron, but like into around iron.
Head to wind. Right? What?
It depends on how you establish the overlap. Is it
No.
So,
Not before the start.
well,
Why?
I've heard
Why?
both ways for a committee.
No. Why not? Why isn't it though?
Because
Anyone know?
Because there's no.
What's the word?
Set course, or it's not. It's
Proper course?
No,
Proper course.
Proper course. Correct. Now, after the start, how the overlap is established comes into play.
Yeah.
Yes. But before the start, there is no proper course. Doesn't exist. Not a thing. So the lure boat can head the windward boat up head to wind. Can't make him tack, but you can head him up head to wind. So it could be like that, right? We're both just sitting here in irons, right? Could do that. Now, like Josh said, it depends. Once go happens, now it depends on how far the lured boat can head the windward boat up. Depends on how that overlap was established, right? Obviously, in a fleet race, it is not going to be advantageous for this lured boat, even if they're allowed to just sit here in irons, keeping this boat in irons, right? That's not going to be advantageous for them because they're just not going to be moving, right? In a team race, the strategy and tactics change a little bit. But we talked about this when we were talking about team racing a couple weeks ago, right? So let's say before the start, this was like this, where this boat comes in here, tacks into lured. So they tack into the lured overlap. Technically, before the start, they can head them up, right? A can head B up, head to wind. After the start, technically, what does A have to do if this is the way that the overlap was established? Technically.
They would have to give them proper form.
No, actually. Because they tacked into the overlap. It's an instantaneous overlap. So technically, they would not have to head down. They could hold B up. Again, not advantageous for A to do that. Because A wants to go. A wants to get moving. Right? Remember, the only time where you can't head someone up past proper course is when?
When you approach from behind.
When you approach from behind. Right. So this boat comes from clear astern, establishes the overlap. Now, they 100% have to head down at go, right? They have to sail their proper course. Again, the not sailing your proper course after go is, not really something that you would do in a fleet race scenario. Here's something interesting. So here, let's go here, and then, so boat comes from clear astern, okay? Here, like this. So A, B, and A came from clear astern, okay? So, blah, blah, blah. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Wind's in a little bit of a left phase. A can't quite make the line. So they have to shoot up past close hauled a bit in order to get over the line, therefore causing B to have to head up to avoid them. B says, you're heading up, you came from clear astern, you're heading up past your proper course. Who's right? And A says, no, this is my proper course. I'm fine, I can do this.
Maybe A?
Why?
Well, are they in irons? Or is
No,
it
no,
just
no,
that
they're not in
they're-
irons. No, they're just past close haul. They have to head up a little past close haul to get above the pin to actually start.
Because you have to make the pin.
Yeah. Their A's proper course at that point is to head up past close haul to actually get over the line. So that is A's proper course. In this scenario, right, if you have that same scenario where A comes from clear astern, right, so here's A, here's B, and then A, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, A is heading up, and A now stays heading up past close haul. right? They're just sitting there, the jib's half luffing, they're going slow. And B now says, hey, what are you doing? You gotta head down. You gotta sail your proper course. In that case, B is
Right.
correct, right? Because A's proper course at that point is not to be sailing half in irons, right? Their proper course is to be sailing close hauled, going fast. But there's that little caveat of that scenario here, where again their proper course, if your proper course is to come up for whatever reason, in this case that's a good reason to come up fast, close hauled, to get around the pin to actually start. So kind of interesting, and that does come up, right? Definitely comes up, when you have these port favored lines, or if all of a sudden, too, like maybe the line wasn't that port favored initially, the wind was here, and then like you had a puff come through, in the last 10 seconds that was really far from the left, coming through. Then all of a sudden, everyone who was heading up like this is now all of a sudden pointing like that. Right, and boats are having a hard time getting across the line. Again, those lured boats. Again, it's not the tack, right? They don't have. You don't get room. You're not entitled to room to tack there or anything, right? The boat to windward, right? So if you had that, right, where you're A and you had B, right, and you're like, I want to tack, I want to get it. They don't have to. B doesn't have to let you tack. They do have to, though, let you get, head up to get around that mark. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Rules wise, yeah, that we talked about barging. Lock rule. Give me. Bye, Ellen.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
I'll see you for sailing.
See you for sailing. Yes. Or anybody, not just lock rule. What else about starts should we discuss?
What I would just say is like a
Okay.
good time to be on the line.
With 3 minutes to go. As soon as sequence starts.
I mean, it depends.
Yeah, I guess it depends.
It depends. Yeah. I mean, Josh, what would you say? Is there like I would say it depends. Right.
The latest I've done is 5 seconds, and that was because it was a hugely boat favorite line, so we were just.
So you came in like almost a little
We
late.
were basically set up like below and to the right of the boat, and
Mhm.
like you're not on the line, but you're set up there. So like
Yeah.
we were fighting 5 other people for that spot, and then like
Mhm.
you start going like right when they're doing the last few whistles. Earliest I've done is like a minute and a half, and it really just depends on the strength of the wind,
Right.
how shifty it is, direction, the size of the fleet, what the fleet's doing. Like it's all you need to figure that out, and it's gonna change every race.
Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah. Like you said, and I've said this too. There's not a cheat sheet to this. Like
Yeah. Usually, like,
it's
a good rule of thumb is like you should not be like thinking, oh, we have to sail to the line if there's like less than a minute. Like you should be in the vicinity to where you can just quickly be in a spot, not
Yes.
like your spot.
right.
Um,
I think that's a good way. Yeah. That's
the usual way to like think about it is when you have a 3-minute sequence, the first minute, I forgot the exact word, but it's like it's more like a warning where they do the 3 beeps. Rules don't apply the same way. You're not really like thinking
Yeah. The
about
rules
like,
don't apply at all. Actually.
Yeah. well, I mean, it's like basic like rule 1, don't like crash into someone, but like the rules
Yeah,
of
but
racing
the rules
aren't
but you're
gonna
not
affect
actually, yeah, so you're not racing until 2
it.
minutes.
Yeah, you're not racing until the
Because you
2
have a
minutes.
warning and then 2 minutes is the prep.
Yeah.
So.
So for that first minute, it's kind of like usually you're just off to the side, you're luffing, you're trying to like figure out what's the wind doing right now, what's it going to be doing. You're looking at like the other boats, figure out what's going on. When you get to 2 minutes, then you start thinking like, okay, here's what we want to do. Maybe we want to like plan out our port approach. We want to get into position so we can time that right. We want to like focus more on the right. We want to come just work up the middle, which you usually never wanna do, but then
Right.
it's more like a minute 30 is when you wanna be like starting to get ready to set up, and then like the best, like you said, a minute usually is like when you always wanna be like set up unless you're doing something different.
Right. So, I mean, here's some, so this is like boats setting up for a start here, right? Now you see nobody's doing, I don't know, where's the pin? Is that the pin?
All the way up there.
Yeah, 'cause that's the gate
Yeah,
up
yeah.
there. I mean, this is just a.
It's pretty boat favored,
It's-
yeah.
No, if you're not, those boats, unless they're trying to, unless this is like a righty that's here right now and they're like saying, oh, it's gonna swing back left after the start, those boats are.
So here's a good example, right? So if you're not, so whatever time in the sequence this is, but if you're this boat,
Oh, you're screwed.
no good, right? You needed to set up and find your spot earlier. At this point, you're not finding the spot, right? There is no spot. There is, I mean, maybe what this guy's gonna gun for is like here,
Try to get in.
but
It's
like,
super easy, they just put their broom out and you can't get it.
but probably 16 is gonna make that spot even smaller, and they're probably not gonna be able to go there. Is there any spot here? Absolutely not, right? There's nothing. So here's a good example also, right, of, so this boat, and this boat, so this is about the barging thing, right? So this boat 10 is already in here. So whatever number this boat is, he's gotta let boat 10 in here. Can head him up or whatever, but he can't force him to get out of here because he's already overlapped with the committee boat, so he'd have to hit the committee boat. This guy, boat whatever, other yellow boat, has zero right to go in here. Zero, right? These boats boxing them out, completely legal. Now, if this boat has two options, right? This boat could try to swing down here, but why is that probably not good? Why would swinging down here probably not be the best? At least in this specific scenario. Anybody? Go, Josh, yeah.
Okay, so just because of where the wind is, if he goes down there, he's gonna get way too much speed, and if he tries to head back up to get that hole between 1 and 3, he's not gonna be able to without like kind of a perfect shoot. And even then, with like how close he is to 10 and the other yellow boat, he's gonna have to go like super tight, and if no one moves, he has a small chance to get it.
Right.
But even then, he has zero hole, he has no room at all, and he's in a better spot right now. Also, if you wanna like
Yeah.
get into that.
So I think, yeah, exactly. I do. I just want to, yeah. So I think coming down here, very few good options here, right? You're going to be behind. You're probably relegating yourself to like at least a second row start here. This spot is the most interesting of the very few options, right? But like Josh said, most likely what's going to happen is you don't just have to worry about boat 1 closing the gap here. You gotta also worry about what this boat's gonna do. This boat's probably gonna realize very soon after this, hey, like, I'm not getting a good start trying to go here, so they're gonna head down. So, if I'm this boat, what should I do? Quit.
No,
No.
that spot.
No, actually, this boat might be able to get a good start if they do this right and they do it soon enough. And we'll play it through and see, but I wanna see what they actually end up doing, but what should they do? So they can't just go full speed here, right? If they keep moving at full speed, they have no right to go in here. They can't just slam in. Don't do that, so what should you do? Anybody?
I guess just wait.
Wait, yeah, wait. So you can either do two things, depending on how close this is, you can either head up, stop, wait, because what's inevitably gonna happen to these boats?
Doubles away.
They're gonna go down, right? So a spot here will open. You just have to wait for it. If this is at like 30 seconds, or like 40, like what I might do here is I might actually even just like do a tack.
You would double.
I would do a double tack probably. I would tack and then tack back, right? So again, kill some time, kill some speed, and then give more time for boat 10 to kind of drift down a bit and leave me a nice spot here, right? If this is like 10 seconds, I'm not gonna probably do a double tack depending on like what my ley line is here. If I'm like gonna make this, I probably would just shoot up and just kind of try to stop. Let's see what they end up doing. I don't know, I haven't seen this. So. Let's see. What do they do? Oh,
Oh, that's
Oh,
just
just like
wrong.
not what we want to see.
Yeah.
And they did that right at the start too.
And they did it.
So I mean it's the right response.
They tack out of there, which is the right thing. Yeah. We can work one more here and then we'll probably vacate because of people wanting to use the room.
Learn or whatever.
Yeah, something like that. Is it hot in here?
It is, yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's not just me. That's a good thing. Right, so everyone's kind of slotting up, they're getting their spots. Right, this guy he thought he was gonna be able to go in there, he can't. Maybe he's gonna be able to, so if he waits here, let's see what happens. This boat, no good. They're not about even with anybody, and they're just gonna get shot out the back. This boat might actually end up okay. Let's see, yeah, it is a bad camera angle, but yeah, that boat ended up fine. Now this boat, again, what's gonna happen here is, this boat is probably, they're gonna get lee-bowed by this guy, and if you wait this long enough, they're gonna end up kinda getting, well, maybe not actually.
No, it's happening. It's that boat's just climbing.
This guy's
up on
getting
that.
lee-bowed hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Both
some of
I
those
don't-
guys, yeah.
I don't know why they bailed out. I don't know.
But again, one of the key things there we're looking at, right, is trying to get, again, the timing, setup, the timing, it depends every race, and get your bow even with other boats. Currently, no, that's not right. So, no. It's very hot.
Yeah.
Wow.
They don't push the heat
You
over.
know what you see?
Is the heat on?
Yeah,
Probably.
Are you serious?
yes.
Jeez.